brought it up, having read it last spring, and that's about the time that I read it as well, before I had the chairmanship of this committee, and realized that when I took chairmanship of this committee, that I had a greater responsibility now that the bell had been rung, and I couldn't unring it. And so that is part of what I think the task, at least agenda is to begin to try to dismantle as much, and the degree to which we believe that we're progressive in D.C. and that we would never participate in laws that do this sort of thing, even though we do. It's right in front of us, and we got to do something about it. Let me ask the rest of the panel some questions, and I hope you don't mind if I assume some expertise in the subject matter. In some areas that I'm not as knowledgeable in. The pot of today is not your grandfather's pot. My understanding is it continues to get more and more potent with greater ability to provide more extreme highs. Do you see the government having an interest in regulating that in any way?
I wouldn't say so. I would put the comparison more to alcohol or to hard liquor and beer. Both are a form of alcohol. It's just the concentration that will get you more intoxicated with less amount of it. There are different chemical profiles to different genetic strains of cannabis. There's over 400 different components of cannabis altogether. So depending on the genetic strain of it, there's more of certain components, more of others, more of essential oils and such. We're really now in the infancy of research and understanding of what the full spectrum of them are, but I wouldn't see that it would be reasonable to prohibit based on percentage of THC concentration.
Well, I don't know if, I mean, analogies have their limits, obviously, that we allow home brewers and home winemakers. We generally don't support stills, and they're both alcohol.
The difference, I would say, though, is that alcohol can kill you, and in unregulated market, you can produce a type of alcohol that can kill someone very easily. It's not the same with cannabis.
Do you see hash in the same category?
It's the same thing where it's not lethal. It's alcohol, it's beer and hard liquor. It's not really. I wouldn't put a comparison that one should be regulated higher over the other.
So you would believe that what's commonly termed as hash should be.
Well, okay, people end up smoking less when they use hash,
Yes.
or they use strong cannabis, which might have a high THC content. People smoke a lot more when there's a low THC content. So it might take a whole joint to get you the same THC as, say, a half a joint of a potency that's twice as much. The highest THC concentrations I've heard of in cannabis are about 25%, and they're pushing up against, I think, a cap. I mean, over the last decade, they have not gone much higher than that. So the trend is to concentrate. But these concentrates, which were developed for the medical side of cannabis, even these concentrates you cannot overdose. And I just think people will end up inhaling less of burnt material. That's usually what happens, because people don't want to get too high and then they can't function.
As they said, most of the information we do have shows that users will self-regulate depending on the potency of the strain. And ultimately, the point is that cannabis of any sort is non-fatal and has no overdose rate for it. Also, this gets to the point of why we really truly need to, we do need to pass this first to stop the bleeding, as it were, to end these disproportionate arrests, but we ultimately need to move towards a fully regulated system so people not only can have a variety of products to choose from, but they are well informed on the potency of the product. Most people don't enjoy being overly high. It's not incredibly a pleasant experience for them. If they knew what dosages they were taking and at what potency levels, most of them would self-regulate.
Out of curiosity, do you know if in the Netherlands or Amsterdam, do they allow home growing of plants?
They allow possession up to about a pound of marijuana, whether it's alive or whether it's dead. But once you get over a certain amount, technically all the marijuana that's grown for the coffee shops is grown illicitly. And the way the government handles it is kind of silly because they have decriminalization, they don't have legalization. They go and they raid these grows periodically, confiscate everything, all the equipment. Then they let the person they just raided buy their equipment back for upwards of $30,000. And that's how this is considered like kind of a tax on their business that's technically illegal. It's silly. It's like we would never do this in the United States. We want laws that make sense, that actually function and work. And I do agree with Councilman Grosso that ABRA is probably well equipped to do this. You know.
There's no shortage of laws in our country, if not city, that don't make sense. One of my concerns, and it may be a false concern, one of my concerns is that about the same number of percentage of residents that support legalization or the same number that supported the bottle bill. And once the bottle bill was proposed for deposit on bottles, it eventually was killed. And there's never been another bottle bill in the district because the other side to the bottle bill was able to mobilize and kill it. Now, that's not a reason not to go forward, but I do know that, and I appreciate, all of each of yours support of this bill along with moving forward, that I want to get this one. They don't need to be one then the other. They can be parallel, but I want to be sure that we don't do anything that, like what happened with the bottle bill. And again, the city overwhelmingly supported the bottle bill, and it was defeated. Then I'm also concerned, and I don't really, don't know how to, this is all new territory, to figure out how to be sure that medical marijuana and the whole cultivation regulatory scheme, and then the people that have invested, that we've, the city's gone down that route, want to be sure that it's successful. And we may need, obviously, we need to make some tweaks to who can have access. I mean, that was fairly too restrictive, and we were probably overly conservative. Do you have concerns that what we're doing either today or further, decriminalizing, if not legalizing, will undo what we've just done with medical marijuana?
I personally don't, as long as the laws that are put forward in the future, as long as they don't repeal or minimize patients' access to medicine or a doctor's ability to recommend medicine, which is already protected. What I believe yesterday it was announced in Washington State that forces now want to repeal the medical marijuana law because they now have the legalization effort in effect. I think as long as efforts are not made along that route, then it shouldn't be a problem. Any protections for everyone, equal protections for medical marijuana patients, the way I look at it, in the sense that patients are then no longer targets. They are not at the forefront of the legal system and of administrative actions against them.
Okay, if we're not going to let people import marijuana to DC, even if we legalize, until the federal government says that's okay.
Right.
And the federal government would have to legalize. So what I think would need to happen is that the medical program we currently have would actually probably have to ramp up to supply anyone of age over 21 who would want to buy cannabis in a place that's licensed to sell it. And I think you could work with give the existing cultivation centers and the existing dispensaries sort of they're the first ones. And so they are rewarded for everything they've done up to this point.
Absolutely.
But maybe like in 2 years' time, you open it up to more people. I don't think you'd want to do this big right away, but I do think the home cultivation addresses one of these concerns of the patients, is that, there are patients who want to grow their own medicine right now. And anyway, I think it's something that patients always advocated for from the very beginning. And I worked on that ballot initiative in '98, and here I am in 2013, still asking for something the voters already approved. And it's something we feel like we have to do it. We have to advocate for it.
Well, clearly, and again, the role of Congress can't be denied in some of the actions that we take. On the Amsterdam issue, I was, and I may be wrong, anecdotally had heard that they're pulling back on some of the things they've been doing. Do you know the reasons for that?
That periodically comes up over there as they cycle through a more conservative government, and usually the efforts don't actually end up going very far. They attempted to restrict it to where you'd actually basically have to get a citizen pass, so that to cut down on the marijuana tourism. Most towns have not implemented that. A couple towns on the border have, but usually it's a lot of talk, but not much follow through, and it varies just on who's in power.
There's a vigorous pushback right now from the marijuana community in Amsterdam in particular, who's saying this has been very good for the economy and you're going to kill it. So actually, I think those conservatives are losing offices now, and there's been a big pushback.
Thank you. Mr. Grasso?
Oh, yes, thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Ettinger, when you were talking about the dispensaries and the cultivation centers, they couldn't do that under decriminalization, right? I mean, I'm not sure. We're not legalizing them to sell to anybody at that point.
Yeah, I was talking about more of a legalization
Right.
bill. Although I think this bill could be amended to go really far and be what I like to call super decriminalization, where you would essentially kill the motive to bring about full legalization, at least right away. I mean, I'm in a position where people are asking me, should we do a ballot initiative or not next year? And my preference is absolutely do not do a ballot initiative because it's expensive. It's $250,000 when you guys could just write these laws. So, and we have a crucial date of January coming up where we're doing it for the November ballot or we're not. So we kind of need to see real progress. And if there was a way to assure that, you know, people possessing just less than an ounce of marijuana had essentially no fine and no civil penalty whatsoever, that's essentially legalization for small quantities, and that's what our initiative is.
And then they could go to a dispensary and purchase it there
No,
without
they
any
wouldn't be
problem?
able to. So that's why I think the home cultivation first, and then years down, maybe a year down the line, council will revisit this and start to say, okay, cultivation and dispensary, you can sell to the general public now, and you don't need a doctor's recommendation. But I'm sorry that people made this huge investment. I was in the running for one of those licenses, and I bailed because I would never sign something that says that I'm admitting to violating federal law, which is what the program does. You know, it's just not, it wasn't for me.
Mr. Bell, I think, you know, I'm concerned around the strength of the product and the cannabis, you know, because I know for medicinal purposes it matters, you know, and how high and how low you get it. And I'm just curious, have you ever done the analysis on whether or not it's like what the street quality is of somebody getting it on the street versus somebody getting it in a...
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do any comparative. In the sense, to do that, you have to submit them to labs, get chemical analysis, things like that. But one of the things about it is that it has a general universal property or effect on patients. Some strains, the more potent, I mean, they can have a little bit more. I mean, you need less medication, but I would say that, I mean, the difference between something that's, let's say, 4% THC compared to 15, 20% THC, it's not something where a patient is gonna inhale it and then all of a sudden just snap out of it, gonna pass out. I mean, it's not that big of a difference. It really is just they have to consume less of it.
I see what you mean.
But the thing about the dispensary system that I just want to add is that was created initially. The laws, when they were first passed, were open so that patients could cultivate and supply their own medication because it was illegal. The dispensary system was established for patients that do not have the ability to cultivate or to gather their own medication. People going through chemotherapy, people that are terminal patients, they cannot grow it themselves. That's one of the basis of the dispensary model.
Makes sense to me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Next, we're going to hear from LaDavion Butler. Mr. Butler?